Hey, this is Dave Negri with Contractor Secret Weapon, and today I have a very special guest, Kevin Berchelmann, who founded, back in 1998, Triangle Performance LLC, and he created it to provide the edge to those organizations that understand the impact of their people, and particularly those in charge. He was in the Air Force for 13 years, and he is a sought-after speaker. His presentations for the International Zinc Association Human Capital, a global focus, was lauded as the best presentation during the 5-day International Executive event at Zinc College in Golden, Colorado. His credentials consummate with his roles with an undergraduate and graduate degrees in aerospace and business management and certified management consultant, and holds a lifetime certification as a senior professional in human resources. And Kevin, I just want to thank you for being with us today and going to share your expertise. And I know the topic we're going to go over is sit down, shut up, and color, leading to my generation, the entitlement thinkers. So I just want to thank you for spending time with us today so we could have some fun.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to being able to address your audience. Thanks.
So about this topic of, sit down, shut up, and color, and basically it's leading to my generation, the entitlement thinking, and I know that's a big thing with a lot of employers in every industry, not just the construction industry. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely would. I think we're seeing, and we're seeing more of it, obviously. I think a lot of it has to do with people my age. We're starting to kind of age out of the workforce, mm-hmm. and so more and more people are coming up within the organization, and I just, they're approaching it from a different sort of look, and it doesn't just impact them, by the way, either. It actually includes other generations. So it's not just a singular generation here that we're talking about. It's a that kind of entitlement feeling is morphing kind of across several generations now. So it's something that we all have to deal with. It's not going away. So it's something we all have to deal with. That's for sure.
So what what caused it? You think? I know you know, but tell us what caused it.
Well, I don't know if I know absolutely for certain, but I think I've got some pretty decent handles on at least some of the things that could have caused it.
Okay.
And it's us. Look in the mirror. We caused it. I mean, we've created this. We in leadership have created this. It didn't happen on its own. It's not like we're victims here and we just woke up one day and said, what the heck's going on? So we can't really, just laugh and point at them because we made them.
We're laughing at the mistake, right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, so the kind of entitlement where things that in the past people who worked felt like a lot of things had to be earned and things you had to really work for stuff, and now there's more and more employees, actually of all generations, but more and more employees feel that a lot of those rewards are right. They're entitlement, and not necessarily just a reward or recognition for performance, or heck, sometimes even a business need. And if you think about it, we did create them. It's easier. People ask for something, and when they start asking, you need them. You've got, you need 5 employees, you need 10 employees, and you've got a full house, you need them all. They ask you for something that's not too difficult, so you just say, okay. And then they continue to ask, and if the asks are continue to be small, you just don't lose a lot of sleep over it. I think a funny thing is, a lot of times this part is generational. Younger people, especially really young people in the workforce today, they ask more questions and they want to know a lot more of the why. It's not really any different than when I first started working either. It's just they're more vocal about it. They actually speak about it versus, I'd kind of go home and grumble and say, if they'd ever tell me why, I could probably help them.
Yeah.
And they, and they're walking around. People say, well, you really have to, everyone should expect to work hard if they want to get rewards. Well, if you're an evidence-based person where you go by evidence, they've got a lot of evidence that says that's not necessarily true. They don't get any feedback to the contrary. So if you don't get any feedback that tells you what you're doing is colossally wrong, why would you change?
For
they
sure.
They still have a need.
Yeah.
I have a client who attendance is a really big deal. They're trying to marshal a bunch of employees early in the morning, and they send them out to work sites, and so it's a really big deal that everybody be where they're supposed to be at the time they're supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But they also need a lot of people, and so they're constantly trying to keep the people that they have and not do anything so egregious it gets people to leave, where they have to keep kind of churning people through, because it takes a while for people to get up to speed. So they're really they're really cognizant about coming in on time, but and they tell them when they hire them, okay, now you have to come in on time. If you're not here, we're going to do that. We'll have a conversation with you. We might suspend you. We might do this, and so they talk about these things that could be consequences, but in the heat of the moment, they need the employee to go to a work site. They're not going to suspend them. They need them at the work site. So this goes on for a while, and then they'll tell me, that I'll talk to them, and they'll say, well, I don't know why they won't do it. I just can't get them to do it. And I'm like, they don't have to do it. I mean, there's absolutely zero consequence. So why would they? Well, that's not true. We have a policy. And I'm like, okay, well, wave the policy at them. I don't know what to tell you, but they have more evidence that says nothing will happen to them than you do that says they will.
Right.
So it's interesting. We've created this. We look at the mirror, and we can look in the mirror and we can find out where this came from. That's for sure.
So you just went through an explanation of what actually caused it, and it's just by the little things. It's like the putting that frog in the pot and boiling the water.
Absolutely, just spot on.
Little by little by little, and then you're cooked.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you don't know what to do or what to do with it or how to handle it. So, do you have people just start over again? Well, see, now that's kind of interesting. So let's think about a few things. So, for starters, when we talk about generations, here's some interesting stuff going on. All generations look to other generations and say they don't get it. They just don't get it. Really young people look at people like me and say, they just don't get it. They just don't understand. And we look at younger people, the conversation we're having right here, and they just don't get it. They just don't understand. And so, like I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily really different because they just happen to be a little more outspoken. Generally, we all have the same wants, desires, needs, from a work environment. There's not a whole lot of difference between those. And one of the things I think that we need to get our minds wrapped around is that we need to communicate in a manner that people can accept it. Now, this is true for anyone in leadership at any time, but this is just doubly true when we're talking about trying to bring a real conversation, real feedback to people who aren't necessarily accustomed to it. We have to decide before we have a conversation, am I trying to change behavior or am I trying to win? If I want to win, I can say whatever I want and make sure I win, because after all, I got the business card, so I'm going to win. But if I want to change their behavior, even if it kills you, right?
Might be a little bit of a different conversation, even though it's not the conversation I want to have.
Yeah. So it's really not about what I want, but what's really best for the company in essence.
That's exactly right, and that's what we need to focus on. So, and that's kind of a good segue when one of the issues that we face when we kind of face off against another generation, we look at them and we look at things differently. Like if you ask most people in leadership, are you concerned about the process or are you concerned about the results? Most of them will tell you that at the end of the day, what they really want is the results. Well, we'll say that, but then we get upset with people who don't do things the way we want them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. Well, they're on their phone. They're texting. I don't know what they're doing. They're Facebooking. What? Well, my question is, are they getting the job done? Yes or no? If they are getting the job done, then a couple things: either just bite your tongue and go worry about something that's more material, or change the job description around a little bit. Change what you want them to do so they'll have a little bit less time.
Yeah, it's like that seems to be in the office where my wife is. That seems to be one of the. Actually, she had one girl that quit because she felt like she got embarrassed because my wife told her to put her phone away 5 times in the same day. And I said, well, that's no great loss, really, but, how do you overcome that? And I'm going, personally, for me, and because I have sometimes zero tolerance, I said I'd have a box. Phone goes in the morning, it comes out at break, and comes out at lunchtime, and you take it home with you. But I don't even get away with that.
And it's not just an issue in the office. I've got residential construction client who they don't do any self-perform, so they use outside trades for everything.
Right.
And they run into those same things. They're thinking something ought to move at a certain schedule, and next thing you know, they see 2 guys standing 3 feet from each other, and they're all got their head buried in their phone and texting or doing whatever it is they're doing, but they're not doing what they wanted them to do.
Right. And it really, when it comes down to it, it's a big loss of productivity when you really boil it down to it.
There's no question it certainly has the potential to be that way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to the communication part, because that's really how this stuff gets better. So at this large home builder, they've been a client for some time, and I work with from the division presidents all the way down to just starting project managers, and we were having a conversation once. Very senior project manager was in the room, and we were talking about trust and the components of trust. And one of the components, without getting too deep here, but one of the components is that you can empathy, that you show that you care. Mm-hmm. And he's just not a soft, fluffy kind of guy. And he saw that as some fuzzy stuff. He didn't like it. You could tell he wasn't in a happy place listening to me talk about this. And finally, I had to ask him, Mike, what's up? I mean, I can see that you're not necessarily on board here. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, but Kevin, what if I really just don't care? And of course, it caught me a little bit off guard. I'm like, so then I kind of, once I recovered, I started back with you why it might be good for him to make sure that people saw that he cared. And he goes, but what if, really, I'm not saying I want anything bad to happen to him. I don't.
Right.
But I don't really care about what's going on at home. I just want him to come to work, and go home. That's all I want him to do.
I empathize with him. I feel his pain.
So I tried and I pushed on him a little bit, and we had some conversations, and finally it was just derailing the whole group. So I said, Mike, let's table that, go offline for it, and you and I'll chat a little bit more. So
yeah.
we didn't chat anymore, and a couple of sessions later, I've got the whole group in there, and we're talking about something entirely different. Has nothing to do with what we'd originally talked about. And in the middle of that conversation, Mike's eyes lit up, and he leans back in his chair, and he says, I got it. I'm like, you got what? We're not even at a key place of what we're talking about today. And he goes, I got it. He said, they just have to believe that I care.
They're not going to believe it unless you really do.
Right. Well, I tried to tell him, I'm not sure how far you're going to get with fake sincerity, Mike, but I guess you can give it a shot. But and it's a hilarious story that I love telling. It was very true, but it also points to something that's very specific. There's especially a lot of, especially in construction, in the hard trades, in the services, industrial services, manufacturing. What we really have grown accustomed to wanting is we want you to just come to work, and go home. I don't need you to be a superstar. It's great if you are, but I don't need that.
Well, that was the last generation's thinking, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Had to be a superstar.
Yeah.
Right. And I think now we're our standards are such that if you'll just come to work, and go home, we'll be plenty happy. So
yeah. and that's not what's coming into the workforce. That's not what they want. Yeah.
And we can lament it, and I'm not necessarily happy with it either, but it is what it is.
Then it's time for us to go out of business, collect welfare or something.
Here's the funny thing. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was speaking someplace. I speak quite a bit, and I was speaking somewhere, and I needed to do a little bit of research. So I always reach out to my clients for this because they're a good source of stories. Yeah. So I called them all, and I talked to like a half dozen people at each client. I didn't just talk to the CE or COO or something like that. I talked to a whole bunch of people I was working with, and I asked them the same thing. I said, "So you're king or queen for the day?" And you get to fire somebody, no questions asked, and you'll have an immediate replacement. So, none of the downside of firing somebody, and no legal issues, and no nothing. You just get to get rid of whoever you're going to get rid of. Who's it going to be? And my expectation was a lot of these, not necessarily motivated younger folks, that they were going to show up on the list. They didn't. It was always some my age, some old guy,
the boss
who wasn't pulling his load anymore.
Wow,
who wasn't able to kind of maintain his own weight, and it was funny. So it's not always what we think it is when we kind of look at situations that are happening. So
what I'm getting out of our conversation here, which has really been awesome, and it's fun because it's fun to look at the different generations and matter of fact, I had a talk with a guy the other day, and we were talking something similar. Because he was in HVAC, and I said, how do you get the younger generation to get on board? And he said, well, I have a franchise I just bought that's all they use, and everyone works fine. And he said, honestly, when you talk about generation, he says, I came out of the Vietnam era, and he said, here was the thing that they thought about then. Right. These guys just come back. They got no job skills. They got nothing. They're no good. They don't want to learn nothing. They don't want to work. They're hippies.
Right.
And he said, the thinking is not really changed a whole lot as far as, managements towards the next generation. He said,
I agree with you completely.
And I go, well, I never thought about it that way, but it's more now. But from what I'm seeing, it's more on the communication level. People, like you said, people ask more questions. So it's not that they really want to be the boss. Of course, they probably would like to be someday, but they want to know what's the reason that they're being tasked to do this. What is the real benefit of the whole thing towards me and what I can actually... I'm trying to think of the right word. I'm just going to say what I can apply my skills toward making the company better.
Well, I think you're spot on. And I think the difference with them versus, say, our generation is, when we talk about younger people, is I think they're willing to say that out loud. They're willing to say out loud, hey, I think I can do this better than what you've been doing it.
And that's great for someone in an open environment. That's the best way I can put it.
The best idea in the world that falls on the ears of someone that doesn't want to hear it isn't gonna change much. Yeah. That's for absolutely sure.
Yeah, and I know that's one of the great things about my wife and my daughter. They run the company. They say, listen, we know that there are certain protocols that we need to do and stuff like that. But if you guys ever come up with something easier or something smarter, or you think will work better, by all means, let us know, because we want this to run as smooth and as efficient for everybody.
When I work with people in leadership about making progress in some of this, we talk about empowerment, and when you mention empowerment, even to my age group, we like the way it sounds.
Sure.
We like what it means. When it works right, we like it. And I tell them, I said, the hardest part about empowering people is learning to say yes. The easy part is to learn how to do the mechanical stuff, like instead of telling people exactly what to do or just answering all their questions, they come to you, they say, boss, how do I do this? What do I do? And you say, you tell me what you think you should do.
Mm-hmm.
and they come up with an idea. And the hardest part that we have today is we got to learn to say yes. Okay,
Right.
do it that way.
I agree.
Even if we know that we probably have a better way. If their way isn't going to start a fire somewhere, then say yes. Allow them to slug it out. They'll make it work, if it's your idea.
Oh, I agree. When I had a painting company, I'd say, this is what I want done. And they go, well, how do you want it done? No, you don't understand. This is what I want done. And this is the amount of time that I expect it should be done. I can tell you how I would do it, but I don't expect you to do it that way. I just want it done.
Right. And we say that, and I think we mean it too. I don't think we're being disingenuous. I think we really mean it. It just kind of irritates us then when we see people who might actually be able to do that quicker than us or different than us, and they didn't ask us, because they'll tend to ask questions about specifics and about our decisions, but they don't always ask a lot of questions on how to do things. And so, when they're figuring out how to do it on their own, we ought to like it a lot, but instead we're like, if you just asked me how to do that, I could probably told you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to go into that one.
We do have to get better at communicating, though. We have to get more specific about communicating. We have to be clear with expectations. We have to manage their performance. If they're not doing what we really need them to do, then we need to say so. And we need to stop looking at the fact that we have additional differences, and just realize that, look, it's an organization, and I have a role, and my role is to make sure that you know the expectations and then perform to those expectations. And if they are, great. If they're not, then you've got to step in, and we've got to ease up on this worrying about stepping on eggshells and this PC crap, and realize that people get offended at something that's inoffensive, that's going to occur sometimes.
Yeah, it is. And, my philosophy, I'm stepping on eggshells. I said, I think every once in a while we need to make scrambled eggs and strain the eggshells. Because omelets are good, too.
I have some clients who will occasionally fall into the, fire-ready aim mode.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk to them about some of these things, and we're working through them, and so they'll start getting better. But I'll get a phone call, and the phone call invariably starts with, Kevin, so I probably should have called you before. And then I just buckle up in my chair and start listening to him. I'm probably not going to be happy.
And it's too late. So the next time.
Right. Exactly.
No, he quit. Okay, the next guy then.
Right.
Oh, wow. Hey, this has really been fun. Any last thoughts about our continuing to work and improve our relationships with any generation?
Right. I'll go back and I think probably the most important part is to ask yourself, even if they're doing something that you don't agree with, even if you've got, you think the work ethic isn't what yours is, which, by the way, when people say work ethic, a good work ethic just means that you work at least as hard as I think I work, right? That's right. Anyone who fits that definition has a good work ethic. But a lot of times, if we would ease up on looking at those things, not because they shouldn't be evaluated, but because if we really want to make sure that they're doing what we're asking them to do in a results perspective, then just decide, look, do I want to win in my communication with them, or do I want to change their behavior? If I want to change their behavior, then I've got to find a different way to do it. Mm-hmm. I've got to find to reach them in a way that they can absorb and internalize and actually change their behavior. And they have to want to, and there has to be a consequence, both positive and negative. And we've just got to make sure those things happen. Otherwise, it's just kind of stupid is as stupid does. If we keep doing the same thing over and over, the chances are pretty good we're going to keep getting the same results.
Absolutely. Wow, this has really been awesome. I just thank you. How do our listeners, get in touch with you? And so give us all your contact information.
Certainly.
And I'll put it on our show notes when when I post this, so we'll be in good shape there too. But how do they get a hold of you? What's the best ways to get a hold of you?
So the website is www.triangleperformance.com, one word. And my email is Kevin, Kevinb, and then at triangleperformance.com. My phone number, 281-257-4442. And it rolls to my cell. And anytime, I'm happy to chat with somebody. I'm also, I like connecting with people just as colleagues as well. So anytime any of your listeners just need to reach out because they have a quick question, I'm happy to entertain it without worrying about sending those little bitty dinky invoices around too. So.
Awesome. That's really been good. This has really been fun, and I really enjoyed talking with you. You've got a lot of great information that hopefully will set some of our listeners back on the right track.
Well, thanks. I really enjoyed it as well, Dave. Thanks for having me.
All right, super.